and how it impacts us today. Here to give us insights is a political commentator and activist, human rights activist, Mr. Pieter Kriel. Welcome to the show.
TJ, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here with you.
Always a pleasure also. Guys, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share. I mean, you can do it now. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe and unlike whatever, but please do it now. Let's get that right. Can you walk us through why politics?
Yeah. So I've always sat with this question and wondered why I specifically chose this. And I think it comes down to the way I grew up. I grew up in a divorced household. And I think from a young age, I was able to pick up on certain kinds of injustices, whether that be lies or manipulation or whatever. So I think I've always had a keen eye for spotting injustice. And as I grew older, especially around the age of 14 or 15, that translated into starting to question everything, whether forms of power, wealth, privilege. And I left religion at the age of around 14. That has really shaped the way I see things. It makes me question things and not just accept it blindly.
Can you walk us through that, the religion component? What were your views before and after? I mean, fine, a lot might have happened after that, but what were your views before and after?
So I always, I'm discouraged in saying that I really had religious views before it. I was raised Christian, right? And I practiced Christianity as a form of tradition, not really belief, because to me it was waking up on a Sunday and being reminded that, hey, we have to go to church now, get dressed. So it wasn't really belief. It was more like a tradition. And I started questioning why I had to do this. And I'm actually very, very literate in the Bible. I know the Bible. I've read the Bible. And that made me question. Reading the Bible made me realize that the Bible has been used as a great obstacle in the progress of humanity.
When I went through some of your prior work, you indicated that there's a relationship between religion and colonialism. Yeah. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. So my point of view has always been that when we look at the history of Africa, you see a lot of African indigenous spirituality before the start of colonialism. People worshipping forefathers, ancient spirits up the mountains or in the clouds, things to do with nature. And around the start of the colonial trade, for most of Africa, that changed. People started practicing in Africa organized religion. They started reading texts for belief, which they've never done because their evidence has been nature, has been the cloud or the sun, or their forefathers answering them through meditation or whatever. It's never been Christianity. Christianity as we know it today was brought to Africa alongside Western thought, alongside Western philosophy. It was given to African people at a large scale as a way to divide the mind and physicality, making you believe that you need to suffer now in order to have a good time later, instead of teaching you radical thought in fighting now to make change later, right? And that taught Africans a very submissive worldview. Even though Christianity spread to Africa, a different path from colonialism, certain parts in Africa like Ethiopia and so forth, Christianity at its most part was brought by colonizers.
Moving on to the aspect of white privilege, you're saying that you did grow up with white privilege. What does white privilege look like?
Yeah, to me, white privilege manifests in many different ways. It manifests in physical, economic value, like money and owning a house or inheriting a house or property or land that has been taken in a forceful or unjust manner. And I've always admitted that I've grown up with economic privilege, right? Even though as a family, we've always been working class. My dad works for a municipality. My mom is a teacher. But I still had privilege. I had the chance to go on vacations each December. My parents were able to come and watch my sports every time because they were able and privileged enough to leave their jobs to come and watch my sport. And I realized that quite early on. So it manifests physically most of the time, and it manifests mentally. Being raised and taught from a young age that being white means being superior. It means being smarter. It means being the bearers of civilization and humanity as we should know it. And that is the most dangerous form of privilege, because it's a sort of colonization of the mind. But white people are still privileged through that colonization.
What would you say? I mean, obviously you've had your perspective. How would you say your perspective or engagement has been on the other side? So, I mean, fine, as a white man, when you interact with a black man, how do you think, or how have you experienced that influencing or determining the behavior or actions, words, etc. of the black man, woman, etc.?
We're talking in terms of social media, right?
Yeah, well, whether it's social media, day-to-day politics, just however.
So starting out with my political commentary about a year ago, seriously, automatically I realized that people from within my own community found great offense by what I had to say, because I think it put them in a position of uncertainty and out of their comfort zone, and that upset them. I had a lot of good interaction from disadvantaged communities, specifically people from townships and so forth. But as things changed, I think it balanced out. I still have a lot of hate from the white community, but I have noticed that I am receiving more and more comments from our African community saying that, well, what is this guy's agenda? What is he trying to do? Does he have presidential ambitions? And is he trying to deceive us? And I've started engaging with that because I think it's so important. I've never said that I've wanted to lead Africa or South Africa, but I want to ignite a flame in young people's minds, making them realize their power when they start questioning authority and resisting. That is so important. And that is what I'd like to inspire.
Going to, just how the bulk of it starts at being apartheid. What impact has apartheid had on society today? And how long can we blame it?
Yeah, no, I think when we look at apartheid, that is a specific handle given to an extensive period of time that has had negative impacts before we gave it the handle apartheid. I like to start with colonialization, at the start of the colonial trade. Okay. South Africa has had negative economic benefits going back 400-500 years, because we have to realize that there was slavery during colonialism. People were excluded, they were killed, there were wars, and this had economic impacts to this day. Apartheid is colonialism with a different name. And so I always say, and I reference back to Nelson Mandela, even though I am a critic of Nelson Mandela, I reference back to this. He said we had a long walk to freedom. And once he attained that freedom, he reminded us that it's an even longer walk to freedom than he first anticipated. So I think we should stop blaming people that point out the devastating effects of apartheid, both economically and mentally, which is more damaging than economically. Because even though we can take away the land now and redistribute the land, if we don't redistribute mental privilege, when we take away that land, we are stuck with the same problem we had in the first place. Because then you are allowing white people to have the belief that their land is being taken away from them. You have to deconstruct masses and have them understand first that what we're doing here is achieving equality in the long run.
Okay, I agree with you. And I understand the redistribution of land. I mean, it's a physical exercise. I mean, you can do that.
Yeah.
Mentally, how do you change the mindset?
Yeah, I think it's important to have education be impactful and designed in a way to prioritize creative thinking and analytical thinking and radical thinking over memorization. Because let's be honest, our education system has been designed to have young people memorize texts and mathematic equations instead of designing an education system that teaches them how to solve these problems and how to think creatively and so forth. So it starts at a young age. I've always said it's very difficult to change the mind of a 40-year-old racist. But if you start working with a young human being who has not been infected with racism yet, and you give him a proper education and exposure and assimilation, you break that entirely. You show people that, and you make them realize that, we're in this together. As a person of European descent, I've realized this quite early on. Why do we cling to Europe? As white people in South Africa, our future has not been in Europe for 400 years. We should be focused on the future and prosperity of the African continent and South Africa. And that mindset needs to be changed at a young age.
You mentioned Mandela, and you have some of your critics of him. What are those and why?
I admire a lot of the things that Nelson Mandela stood for and tried to achieve, alongside people like Desmond Tutu and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But I do think, to a large extent, practices and experiments like that, the TRC, was very performative in nature. There were a lot of clever excuses, but not a lot of empathy and heartfelt sorry for what has been done, what has been said, and what has been taken away from the people of South Africa, the indigenous people of South Africa, for hundreds of years. I'm not saying, I've never been an apologist, and I will never be. I don't apologize for apartheid because I was not a part of apartheid. But as a person of white descent, I have to acknowledge that apartheid existed. It had devastating effects. And the only way we're going to fix this is by acknowledging it first and then tackling it head on. But the problem with most conservative, most narrow-thinking white people is that they don't start first by acknowledging that apartheid was as bad as we say it was.
That was, I mean, you obviously answered the question about the Mandela, but some of the guys you did look up to, Chris Honey's.
Yeah.
What was special about them?
Chris Hani, Steve Biko, Thomas Sankara, Michelle, these are people that questioned authority. These are people that deconstructed their mind at a young age. They saw through the facades of organized religion. I to be quite honest with you, perhaps Hani was a agnostic atheist or whatever, but I'm not denying that they might have had spiritual beliefs, but they dared not touch organized religion because they knew that it was a tool for oppression brought here by colonizers. And that goes for most of organized religion. We need to accept that we can have religion as a good thing. Religion and religious communities have one task. They need to build community. They need to feed the hunger, the hungry people, and they need to build community. That's all. They should start being taxed because they are organizations taking in money, and it should stop serving as a colonial tool, telling people that when they die, they'll have a better life than they have now, and continue giving their 10 rand every Saturday or Sunday to their pastor. We've been taught that the future is something created later. The future is something fought for now.
In a South African context and African at large, how would you say the relationship between religion or spirituality and heritage should be moving forward?
Well, I don't think I should speak for Africa as a whole.
Okay.
But I do think that it is so important that we realize the importance of deconstruction, especially in Africa. We need to go back to, and people need to be able to go back to their original roots and see if they want to follow that and if they want to adhere to that. But in my personal opinion, I think spirituality is a very good thing. Meditation, believing that, you know what, there is a cause and effect, something created, and you have an awe for nature or the universe. But the sexism, the racism, the misogyny, the brutal things that you see in religious texts should tell you that it has once endorsed slavery. It has once endorsed colonialism and racism and so forth. Choose the good parts. Love thy neighbor like you love thyself. And get rid of the outdated parts that people who lived in deserts thousands of years ago believed.
Okay. So that's more of the backdrop and history of a lot of essay and how we somewhat got here. Now we are here. From your analysis and analysis of political parties, etc., where are we and our current political system?
South Africa is in a very dangerous spot because we now have 3 or 4 contesting parties, big parties, that basically sit at the precipice of power. Now we have
these 4 parties.
Let's call it the MK party, the EFF party, perhaps the ANC and the DA.
Okay.
Right? And we have so many other political parties. Now the question is, do we trust any of these 4 political parties in big positions? Do we trust the ANC? Well, people probably will still vote for them, but trust is fading relatively quickly. You have DA, which have gained perhaps a few percentage points, but that is from previous Freedom Front voters. I don't think the DA's voting base will grow beyond 30% very quickly. So we are left with 2 other parties, MK and EFF. Which one are people going to vote for? When you look at online perspective, in my opinion, people are disenfranchised and unhappy with political parties. I've endorsed EFF in 2024 elections.
Okay.
I waited before joining any political party. I told myself that I had to keep my name independent. But I've been reached by MK. I've not been reached by EFF. And I've had a look back